everyone. Thank you for joining me. Today I want to talk about our core, but more specifically the deep core, because there's a lot of confusion when I speak to clients about what the core is. We have our superficial muscles of the core, the rectus abdominal, the hips, the glutes, the back muscles, but then when we talk about deep core, we talk about a different set of muscles that help to stabilize our core and also aid us in proper breathing. So those are the ones I'm going to talk about today. People describe the core in different ways, but when we're talking about the deep core, I'm going to be talking about our diaphragm, our pelvic floor, our transverse abdominis, and our multifidus muscles. So let's start with the diaphragm. It's a really important muscle, prime muscle in breathing, and it's often misused, or we develop patterns of poor use in our diaphragm, which can lead to a bunch of other issues. So the diaphragm is a dome-shaped muscle. It sits right under your ribs. It divides the abdominal cavity from the upper respiratory cavity. And being a muscle, a lot of people over time will develop a weak and or tight diaphragm. So the diaphragm must coordinate with the pelvic floor muscles. So ideally when we're breathing, when we inhale, the diaphragm will move downward to suck the air into our lungs and allow the rib cage to expand. As the diaphragm moves downward, ideally we want our pelvic floor muscles, which are kind of a net of muscles that sit deep into the pelvic area. We want those ideally to drop down as well. So this action of inhale, pelvic floor relaxes, diaphragm releases downward, and then as we exhale, pelvic floor draws up, and then the pressure draws the diaphragm up, and that allows the air to come back out. So often what I see with clients is a dysfunction between these two. So they may, as they inhale, they may suck the diaphragm up. They may not be able to release their pelvic floor or contract it. And it can lead to a bunch of things. It can lead to, as I said before, not being able to get enough oxygen into the lungs. It can even lead to overworking of the back muscles. It can lead to what clients complain about, a paunch look in their belly, because these muscles are not functioning, when you inhale, you tend to press out through the abdominal muscles and maybe stretch those muscles, creating that paunch look. So those are the two of the prime muscles. And then we also want to focus on the transverse abdominis, which is one of the deepest abdominal muscles. And it runs basically from the rib cage all the way down to the pubic bone. And then we also talk about the multifidus muscles, which are the muscles of the back. So you have your spine, and there are a bunch of little muscles, short little muscles that run from the spine. That's how I'm describing it. So yes, these muscles too we have to be able to, as we inhale, as you can imagine your diaphragm dropping down, pelvic floor releases. We can also want to imagine the relaxing of those muscles, kind of like a canister expanding outward. And as we exhale, we want a bit of activation of the transverse abdominis, multifidus kind of drawing in towards the midline, and then of the pelvic floor lifting and diaphragm lifting. So that's ideal breathing. You're not necessarily I talk a lot with clients about imagining your diaphragm working. You won't necessarily be able to feel it working. So we're just gonna do a brief exercise to kind of promote that diaphragmatic breathing. So I want you to just take your hands to the lower rib, so just kind of where your rib cage narrows here. We're gonna focus, ideally if you can inhale through your nose, you're gonna inhale through your nose. As you do that, you wanna keep your shoulders relaxed for now, and you wanna try to feel like the ribs are expanding out to the side laterally. And then as you exhale, you just kind of let the ribs come back towards the midline. What I find with clients that are active, that they tend to have too much tightness, like in that exhale, there's too much tightness into their rib cage. So what I usually want them to focus on is more expanding, widening the rib cage. So we'll try that again, a few breaths. Inhale through your nose. Imagine the air coming into the diaphragm, diaphragm's drawing down, ribs are expanding. And as you exhale, you can imagine that diaphragm coming up, ribs release. We'll do that again. And exhale. Now, as you're doing this, can you keep the shoulders, neck, and jaw relaxed? And then let that go. So you may have felt very little movement, and that's okay. We're just kind of trying to start to expand the rib cage. I cue that we breathe wide into the ribs because usually I find clients lack that expansion laterally. But when you get more used to it, when you're able to start expanding laterally, we do want to work the front and the back ribs as well. But I want you to focus first on wide and then also incorporating just front, back, opening up your rib cage. As you also do the diaphragmatic breath, let's take a couple more and focus a little bit more on our pelvic floor muscles. They're also described as kind of a sling of muscles that are at the base of the pelvis. So you can visually imagine as you inhale, if you can still think about those ribs expanding, diaphragm lowering, imagine the spreading of those muscles. A cue that helps sometimes is to think of breathing wide into your hips, or if you're seated, relax the pelvic floor to the floor. And then you can let that go, exhaling. So we'll inhale, try to remember still diaphragm working, lowering, imagining it. Then breathe all the way down, feel you're breathing all the way into the hips, relax the pelvic floor. And then as you exhale, to start, focus more on relaxing the pelvic floor. When you feel you get that relaxation, as you exhale now, you can think of kind of drawing those muscles all together, almost like a string lifting up from the center of the pelvic floor, drawing up through the crown of the head. So let's do a few more incorporating diaphragm, pelvic floor. Inhale, expand, diaphragm releases, pelvic floor releases. Exhale, feel everything coming up. Inhale, relax your hips. Exhale, draw up. Once more. And letting that release. So don't be hard on yourself. This takes a while to get. I'm also going to do another video of activating the deep core in different positions, because sometimes people feel that seated it's hard, so they prefer lying down or on all fours. So I'll do that in an upcoming video, but just keep practicing this breathing. Ideally, to have the strong body you want to work with stability. You want to get your breathing and stability down first, and then move on to more complex exercises. Thank you for joining me, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.